that was everything that I wanted in my career, and I achieved that. And that for me was a really good marker. And it also reminds me, that was something that just always reminded me to set those little goals and be proud of the conversations and the little things that little kid you would have loved, and not just the TV show. So now when I set goals, I try and do that too and write those little things in. But what had happened with that is when I finished that list, I go, okay, I got to make a new list. And this was a couple months ago. I'm like, I got to make it as big as I possibly can. What are things that I've always wanted? And I wrote on the list, the first thing was get New York Times and LA Times, because I've wanted them since I was a kid. And that just seems like a big goal. And then I love the strategy, what kind of shows, how do I put myself out there? How do I make the right contacts? What do I do to make that happen? And I just loved creatively starting to think about that. And I wrote it down. I made that list. I went to bed, and the next morning to go to the gym. And as I'm getting out of the car, my phone rings, and it's the New York Times. And it was 12 hours after I'd written that out and made that goal for the first time in my life. And it was just this random occurrence. Someone had said something to someone and they connected. And so I had the story I was a part of the story that came out in the Times a few months ago. But that was part of it, I think, for me, is just putting those things out there. And I mean, it's a half in, half out whether I believe in the whole, manifestation concept, but I do believe if you put things out there enough, they will start to come to you. If you do the work and you're determined and persistent and you do it the right way, the things that you want will want you to. And that New York, that was the show in New York that I did for the Times ended up being the hospital in and out show. So obviously it was one of those moments where it was this goal I wanted forever. And oh my God, the universe gave me this perfect moment. I wrote it down. They called me the next day. It was like, is God listening to everything I'm saying? Or there's somebody in my outlets? How do they know I wanted this and wanted it right now? And it happened. And I booked the show in New York. And I got the sickest I've probably ever been in my life. And I was in the hospital all day. And I went and did the show. And it was the worst show of my life, with the journalists from the Times and all these agencies that I had brought to see me. It was one of the worst performances I ever did. And I went back to the hospital, and then I flew out of New York the next day. It was just one of those things, and I was like, I could not have beat myself up about it, because it was out of my control, and I still did the best I could, and the article still came out, and I still made the connections, and it's just one of those things I laugh at now. I mean, I didn't find it as funny when it was happening, but now I'm just like, that's a little comical.
I love how that's your sort of reasoning. It's like, I want to go into one of the biggest newspapers of all time. I want to be on TV. It's just that kind of where most people are like, I want to go and live in a city. I want to go. You had these goals and aspirations, and it reminds me of that story of Chris Jericho, the wrestler. He had
Mm,
he'd been told that he wanted to come to the WWF at the time and be really successful, and he always thought he would build up his career and he'd win it at the biggest matches and all that. And he got told that he was going to win the title at catering because they needed somebody new to take it. Then he won the
mm.
titles, came back into the locker room thinking they'd have a party for him. First ever Universal Champion, winning the two titles, like joining them together. Everybody else had gone home. And then he went back to his hotel, had a pizza, got locked out of his hotel room, and the guy wouldn't let him back in because he didn't believe who he was. So he had to tell him that there's these two big titles on his bed.